Messenger RNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna have been shown to be highly effective in preventing COVID-19. But this technology is very new, and that's made them extremely vulnerable to disinformation campaigns. These include a false worry or a false belief that the mRNA vaccines could somehow alter your DNA. So, are mRNA vaccines actually risky? These are the facts that you need to know. So, what are mRNA vaccines, and how do they differ from traditional vaccines? Instead of introducing into the body a weakened version of a virus or a piece of a virus, they temporarily turn the body's cells into tiny vaccine-making factories. So how do they do this? Well, what they use is synthesized versions of something called messenger RNA. Now, that's a molecule that normally carries genetic coding from our DNA in the nucleus to the body's protein-making machinery. But what happens here with the vaccines, mRNA, once introduced in the body, instructs the body to make the spike protein, which is a key protein that the SARS-CoV-2 virus uses to enter cells. And now this, in turn, stimulates the body to make long-lasting antibodies to the coronavirus. Messenger RNA vaccines are quicker to develop than traditional ones because production doesn't require growing live viruses or viral proteins inside live cells. Also, messenger RNA's modular nature makes designing vaccines relatively straightforward. In the case of Moderna's vaccine, it took only a few days for researchers to come up with the messenger RNA sequence that is used in the actual vaccine. So what type of disinformation is actually being spread about mRNA vaccines? Well, one thing that that's out there a lot is that steps were somehow skipped in developing or authorizing the vaccines. Now, it's true that these vaccines reached the market in absolutely record time, but that's actually not because any testing steps were skipped. Basically, companies were able to speed up the process by performing some testing steps in parallel. And in addition, especially in the case of Moderna's vaccine, the U.S. government took big financial risks by paying to gear up manufacturing well before the results were in. And in fact, even with the emergency use authorization of these vaccines, the FDA actually established strict guidelines in advance for what they'd be required to get emergency approval. And the vaccines went through full phase 3 trials with 30,000 patients, at least that many or more. And they were required to show more than 50% efficacy in preventing symptomatic disease. And the two messenger RNA vaccines easily outperformed that standard. And they were also required to show 2 months of safety follow-up from their phase 3 trials. Another thing that's out there that's disinformation is the suggestion that somehow messenger RNA vaccines are somehow going to alter your DNA. Despite the name messenger RNA, these vaccines, they don't get into the cell's nucleus at all. They don't change your DNA in any way. And so they're not analogous to gene therapies that go actually change your DNA. These vaccines, messenger RNA is short-lived and they don't alter the DNA in any way. Another worry that's out there is that there have been many adverse event reports for these vaccines through the adverse event reporting database, more so for these vaccines than for other vaccines, such as influenza vaccines. Now, it's true there have been a lot of voluntary adverse event reports to the databases kept by the government for the vaccines. But comparing them to older technologies that have been out there for decades and decades, it's not an appropriate or meaningful comparison, according to top authorities that I spoke to. Basically, the number of these reports tends to surge when a treatment or vaccine is in the news, and really nothing's been more in the headlines or more in the news or more top of mind these days in COVID-19 vaccines. The reports can be filed by anyone. They don't constitute confirmation at all that vaccines cause an adverse event. Now, given the large numbers of people being inoculated these days, the chances that some unlucky people will get sick or even die shortly after getting the shots, there's a significant chance that it'll happen regardless of the vaccine. And then another worry is that we don't know the long-term side effects of the vaccines. Now that, I guess, is true because by definition, you can't know long-term effects for something so new. First of all, the worst vaccine side effects do tend to show up in the first couple of months. And that's why the U.S. Food and Drug Administration insisted on getting 2 months of full safety data for the vaccines from the phase 3 trials before giving them emergency authorization. Now, adverse event reports since then have not detected any patterns of death that would indicate a problem with the vaccine, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says. so far, the real-world results that have been starting to roll in look good. The data from Israel's largest healthcare organization found that after 2 doses, Pfizer's vaccine was 94% effective against symptomatic COVID and prevented 87% of COVID hospitalizations. And that's according to peer-reviewed published data. I'm Robert Langreth for Bloomberg News.